Hey folks, just really quick, I wanted to let you know that I Am Salt Lake podcast is now available for listening right inside your Pandora app. Just do a search for I Am Salt Lake and you'll be good to go. Go do it. Support for I Am Salt Lake comes from KRCL 90.9, amplifying community voices since 1979. This listener-supported music discovery station covers everything from reggae and punk rock to local grassroots activism. Listen today at 90.9 FM or online at krcl.org.
This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by our friends at Greenbike and Libsyn. We're going to be telling you more about them later in this episode.
All right, I want to personally welcome you out today, give you a big group hug. Welcome to episode 408 of I Am Salt Lake podcast. My name's Chris Hollifield.
And my name's Chrissy Hollifield.
So you all ready for Thanksgiving, Chrissy?
Mostly. I want to have the best side at the family dinners. What do you think?
Is there a contest this year?
Every year in my mind, there's a contest.
You always want to do one up from the other siblings, huh?
Why do we do that to ourselves? But whatever, it's fun.
Hey, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, maybe you just stumbled upon this podcast, or maybe your neighbor told you all about it. First of all, thank you and welcome. Hey, if this is your first time and you're asking yourself, what is this podcast all about? Well, this podcast is all about showcasing awesome people in Salt Lake City. Chrissy and myself, we're talking to musicians, authors, business owners, restaurant owners, distilleries, tattoo artists, food truck owners. We even talked to a magician one time, guys. Really, anyone that might have a cool story to share, we're talking to them right here on this podcast. Hey, who's joining us on this episode, Chrissy?
Today on this episode of the podcast, we are joined by Rebecca Frost. We get to talk to her about all the podcasts she's been a part of, what it's like for her being the first full-time female panelist on Geekshow Podcast, and how she got teamed up with Hello Sweetie Podcast, and so much more. We're going to get into that conversation here in just a minute.
I really love talking to other podcasters. I think it's like my favorite thing.
And I love talking to her because we geeked out a little bit too about other stuff.
Hey, before we get into that conversation with Rebecca Frost, I want to tell you about one of our awesome sponsors, Greenbike. I really love having Greenbike as a sponsor of this podcast. Hey, support for I Am Salt Lake podcast is provided by Greenbike, Salt Lake City's nonprofit bike share, connecting employment in residential centers to transit stops and popular entertainment destinations. Greenbike seeks to improve community health, air quality, and increase the use of existing transit infrastructure. Greenbike is a local, nonprofit, and public-private partnership between Salt Lake City, the Utah Transit Authority, Select Health, and other private sponsors.
To date, Green Bikers have removed 5.5 million vehicle miles from local roads, prevented nearly 5 million pounds of CO2 from entering our air, all while burning 70 million calories in the process. That's about 246,000 slices of pizza.
It's a lot of pizza.
It is a lot of pizza.
But I love pizza. Hey, to learn more about Greenbike and find out how you can take as many rides as you want for a year for less than 20 cents a day, follow Greenbike on social media at SLC Bike Share or visit greenbikeslc.org. Go check it out. And if you've never took Greenbike around downtown or any part of Salt Lake City, do yourself a favor today. Go hop on one. Go try it out. I mean, I can't think of a better way to get around Salt Lake City, Chrissy.
Oh, no, it's so much fun.
Great way to get around. Great way to get around. All right, here's that conversation that we had with Rebecca Frost when she came over to our podcast studio, and we got to find out all about her podcasting journey, her writing journey, and just who is Rebecca Frost. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the conversation. How many podcasts total, with all the podcasts that you've done, how many episodes do you think you've recorded on between all the podcasts? Just a guess. Because I think about that all the time. Like when I come and do this and I'm always like, man, you would think with all the episodes that I've recorded of this podcast, you would think I would just
It would eventually get comfortable.
Yeah, but you still get nervous a little bit.
Yeah,
do you still find yourself nervous?
I don't think so. It's like, it feels like so natural to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably in like the 500s.
That you've done with all the podcasts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're going where this is,
Sure.
this
Cold
is,
open.
Yeah, cold open. We'll give you a proper introduction.
500. Probably like 500.
That's like a lot of talking.
It's a lot of talking.
Yeah.
That's a lot of opinions that like, do people really need to hear my opinions?
They do. They always do. It's very important.
Was Hello Sweetie the first podcast that you did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was like the very first one that I did. I met the girls through roller derby, and I had a really bad injury there. We were doing a scrimmage, and I wound up somehow sitting flat in midair, and I landed like right on my tailbone. And it's like the only time that I've been like knocked out and like couldn't play for like the rest of the game. And I was just like in tears. And one of the girls from Hello Sweetie, Crystal, came over to like check on me. And I was like, thanks. By the way, I listened to your podcast, because they had started it before I was on it. And so, I knew it existed, so I listened to it, and I was like, thanks, I listened to your podcast, and you got some stuff wrong. And
you told Crystal that.
Yeah, they don't like it when I tell that story, but
That's awesome.
and then they invited me to like do a guest episode with them. And then just like ever since then, I have been doing it. And this was in like 2012, maybe.
Yeah. Cause I know it wasn't, I Am Salt Lake started in 2012 because it was kind of around the same time.
Around the same time.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I think
Maybe
we were both in that, like podcast issue of Slug, I think.
Yeah.
At like the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Which you actually wrote.
Did.
Yeah. I was telling Chrissy this actually. That was one of the first write-ups that I got about with the podcast. I think Gavin got me first with Gavin's Underground.
Probably.
Which he doesn't do anymore, which is kind of I liked Gavin's Underground.
I know, I did too.
But, yeah, so you were one of the first, 2012.
I think it was 2012.
That is,
You guys are OG.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, so
I don't think I started till 2014. Sorry.
I didn't know what to say to that.
Awkward. Okay.
So you started with Hello Sweetie, and then, you're doing like 4 podcasts now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead and, give them a plug.
Oh God. So it started with Hello Sweetie, and then let's see. Okay. Here's my consistent rotation right now. Hello Sweetie, Big Shiny Robot, an improv one called Rebootleggers, and Geekshow Podcast.
That is so cool. How do you find the time for all this?
I don't. Well, actually, it's actually really not that bad, because like my fiance and I both really stress like doing things together, but also having like separate interests. And so he has his separate interests and I have my separate interests. And so like, this is my hobby. His hobby is like LARPing. So he is always just like out LARPing or doing games with his friends. And me, I'm just like sitting in a room talking with people is my hobby.
Awesome.
Has he ever podcast? Do you get him involved at all?
Is he a
podcast listener?
He's more of an audiobook listener.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If he does listen to podcasts, it's more of like the boring podcast, like Mr. Money Mustache, like the more financial, which are super interesting. And I'm
like
not,
adult podcasts that are educational and not
every
fun.
now and then I'll get him into one. Like we started listening to Hello from the Magic Tavern.
Oh my gosh, that is my favorite podcast of all time.
I just caught up, and so now
Okay.
I'm like I have to wait every week for it.
Have you listened? Well, then obviously you've heard Offices and Bosses.
Not like in its entirety.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, no, me neither. Just the bonus episodes.
Just the bonus episodes.
Oh my gosh. It's
What is that? What is this podcast about?
so Hello from the Magic Tavern is. Go ahead, explain it for us.
It's an interview-based show, kind of like this. So the premise of it is it's a normal guy fell into a magical portal behind a Burger King
In the city of Chicago.
And now he is in the magical land of Foon. And he's got these 2 friends. One's a wizard and one's a shapeshifter who's just always in the form of a badger. So he's like a talking badger. And it's just like comedy interview style podcast.
Yeah.
And every week they have like a new guest who is some kind of like fantasy creature person. And they're in their 3rd season now, and they're starting to get like bigger name celebrities.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so it's improv. It's a group of improv actors. And it's so great.
Yeah, like
I would love to go to a live show.
Who is the
Adel Rafai.
Do you listen to Hey Riddle Riddle?
I did, and I really like it. I need to catch up on it.
I listen to that one like religiously.
Really? I
Yeah.
need to listen to it more. I love Adel Rafai.
Me too.
He's like the most brilliant comedian I've ever heard.
But like I tell people, like, Hey Riddle Riddle is one of my most favorite podcasts, but it's something that everyone hates. It's improv actors like doing riddles. Like nobody likes that.
How can you not like that?
But I'm like, I love it.
Everybody can just bite the wall because that's awesome.
You guys should start a podcast together.
About
I'm just
podcasts.
We can
sitting
just
here
talk
watching.
about funny people instead of being funny.
So you do 4 podcasts, but you just get on. You just get on the mic. You're not doing like any of the editing or the production of any of it afterwards.
Unfortunately, no.
See, because that's where like a lot of the time consuming goes in. Because you're lucky in that that way. That you can just get on, you turn the mic on, you don't have to find like people to bring on the podcast. You just go on and talk geek stuff.
And I do feel like kind of bad about it. I think probably the most work I do is for Big Shiny Robot. I don't do any of the editing and I don't do any of like the magic computer stuff. But when I do remember, I put it up on the BigShinyRobot.com website and like work to gather new information for it. That one's probably the one I put the most work into.
So what was it? The
Rebootleggers.
What is that podcast?
So it's two guys. I also have a habit of I befriend people and then I force my way onto their podcast. And that's how
that's how you got here.
Are you going to be you're going to be a new co-host on here?
I don't know. It's a curse.
You could be.
It is a curse. But Rebootleggers, it's these two guys and every other week they take a movie or a book or a video game and they reboot it. It's really just like 45 minutes to an hour of improv and just like spitballing ideas and creating a rebooted plot.
That sounds amazing.
It's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
But like they asked me, cause I followed them on Twitter and like we interacted on Twitter and, the host had emailed me and asked if I would guest and we just got along so well that I was like, hey, I'll be back next week. And then I've just like been on the show ever since.
Wait, so you invited yourself back on?
Kind of. Well, not like, I was like, hey, I had a blast. If you guys want me back, like, more than happy to come back.
Sure.
And
I like your style.
but that's how I've practically made it onto every podcast I've been on.
Is that how you got on Geek Show?
Kind of, yeah. I've known Carrie since I was like a kid because my dad's been in radio for God knows how long. And so I've just known Carrie for a long time. And then he started asking me to like do little guest spots on Geek Show. Then there was one day where I was like, hey, you got a spot that opens up. I want it. And I told him that.
No kidding. I mean, were you kind of joking though?
No, I was serious. I was like, hey, you get a spot that opens up. I want it. And he's like, you're my first phone call. And then unfortunately I was his first phone call.
Yeah.
and I was like, yeah. And I didn't want it like this because that's when Jimmy passed away. But yeah. But I was like, yeah, I'm happy to.
Did it catch you off guard a little bit though? I mean, when so he calls you up and you're like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. I mean, that's a big deal, right? I mean, it is. I think so.
I mean, it's kind of crazy because like I was really sad to lose Jimmy, but I did have that, selfish human thought of, well, this opens up doors for me. So it wasn't really like shocked or anything. I was more like, okay, let's go to the.
Just got to keep the ball rolling.
It's not ideal.
Yeah. It's not ideal. Yeah. But show's got to go on.
Mm-hmm.
But you would like go on as a guest quite often, like kind of guest co-host. So you already knew you could hang out with the other guys. I mean, it's the first female full-time panelist.
Yeah.
Even on the crest, the whole 9 yards.
You broke the glass ceiling. How does that feel?
I know.
That's a big deal.
It really is. It's a big deal, especially because like now in at least 2019, like being a girl in geek stuff is a big deal and should be normalized. But they wanted me on the show for the longest time, but they didn't want me to do both Hello Sweetie and Geek Show at the same time because they felt like there would be too much podcast. I mean, look at me now. But
you're like, no, 4's fine.
Yeah. And then I moved to New York. And
so were you doing full-time Geek Show before you moved to New York?
Oh no, and I only just started doing full-time Geek Show.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Ago.
That's what I was going to say because it's pretty recent.
Yeah, it's like super recent. I'd never even guested on Geek Show until after I moved back from New York.
Okay.
Yeah, but like I've known those guys forever. At least since I started doing Hello Sweetie, because I would start going to like Lucky 13 pub quiz and like going to the same events.
Yeah.
So I was like pretty familiar with them. And they wanted me on the show for the longest time, but I just never really lined up.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the few people that can like keep up with them because they're a lot.
They are.
And it takes like a certain personality type to like keep
You have to be able to interject yourself at a whim, just quick. It's
and I've learned to do that. Like podcasting, it probably required the many years of podcasting before to be able to get to that point because room full of people who love to talk, like you just kind of have to
talk and drink,
get in it.
So you get the two of those mixed up here.
Oh yeah. And we all think we're hilarious. So yeah.
No, they're a good group of guys though. They're really good. I mean, it seems like you get along well with them on that. I was just curious how that worked out with with the whole. So are you doing Hello Sweetie now then too, or so you are
So you guys brought back Hello Sweetie, right? Like you retired it and then brought it back.
So we got to 300 episodes and we decided we're going to retire it. We're going to turn it into Hello Sweetie Podcast Network, where we don't do Hello Sweetie Podcast anymore, but we wanted to create an umbrella for other podcasts to network and be a community.
Cross-promote.
Yeah. And we also wanted to offer up like, hey, if you don't know how to podcast and you want to get started, like, we're happy to help. We're not going to do it for you, but like, we're happy to help. Like, we'll help you host it. We'll like give you pointers, but you know, whatever you want to do, if you want to come under our umbrella, please do. And I think now we're up to like 9 podcasts under our Hello Sweetie Podcast Network umbrella. Yeah.
That's awesome.
But then what made you decide to bring Hello Sweetie back, or what the group or who's, I don't know, what was that all about?
So we kind of did a spin-off podcast, me, Charity, and Crystal. We did kind of a spin-off podcast called The Box, because on Hello Sweetie Podcast, we had a segment called The Box where we ran down everything in the box office that week. And so we did a spin-off where it was just kind of us talking about stuff that we watched. And that can only go so far. And we weren't really getting the push that we used to with Hello Sweetie. Hello Sweetie just had such a brand recognition that we were like, you know what, we should just bring it back. And so we just brought it back.
Very
Love
cool.
it.
Yeah. No. You were mentioning earlier, like how your dad, that with the radio, Bill Frost.
Yeah.
For people listening, is that tough? Like, was it tough to kind of try to blaze your own trail in all of this stuff as he kind of had his thing, or I mean, were they kind of separate, or how did that work out, or is that something you'd rather not talk about? I don't know.
Yeah, it wasn't tough. If anything, it was helpful because I could use nepotism and I could be like, oh, Bill Frost is my dad. And it helped me get an internship at City Weekly, and it helped me out at Slug. But it also, it did kind of suck for at least the first little while where, oh yeah, Bill Frost is my dad. But I'm also my own cool person. And so I worked really hard to kind of like prove myself that.
Yeah. It's really hard to kind of be in the shadow of someone that everybody is aware of. Yeah. And then prove that you're still your own person and you have your own skills and talents.
But it's definitely it's evolved now where people are like, oh, Bill Frost is your dad. And Rebecca Frost it's this like, my mom is like, she'll sometimes walk into a room, we'll be talking shop, and she's like, whoa, heads are too big in here. I can't really like walk around in here. But like, it's gotten to a point now where like, I am recognized as my own person. And like, Bill Frost is my dad, which he's cool.
Yeah.
But like, I do a lot of my own cool stuff too. And so I'm getting recognized more for that.
See, and I met you through stand-up, and I had no idea. Like, I didn't know any of this. I didn't know who your dad was. I didn't know any of that stuff.
There's a lot of people who don't, and it just makes me feel like a lot less pressure.
Yeah, well, for sure.
You don't. He's not, because he's not working at City Weekly anymore, so he's not in the light there as much. I think is really where. But gosh, you got to know who Bill Frost is.
Well, now I do.
No, see, that's right. You did.
He's Rebecca's dad.
Stand-up comedy. You mentioned that too. Yeah. Gosh, you did everything.
I've done a lot. Yeah.
You just kind of like want to do something and do it.
I am like, that is like exactly. I'm a Taurus, so I'm really stubborn, and so if I get my brain on an idea that I really want to do, I'm like, hey, I will not rest till I do the thing. And so, yeah, I did stand up for a while. I kind of do it. I like to dabble more in like improv now, but yeah, I don't do stand up as much as I used to.
How long were you doing that for?
Oh, not very long. Maybe like 3-ish years.
Okay.
Yeah, not super long.
That's still
you and Crystal did it together. Like, so I think I was doing it for about a year, and then you and Crystal showed up, and I saw you guys doing it, and Eileen Dobbins kind of at the same time.
Yeah.
And
Is she still doing stand-up?
You know,
yeah, she is.
She probably
Eileen
she's
is,
good.
And
I just was so excited to see all these women come in.
You should go to I went to open mic a couple months ago, I think, and it was like 34% women.
Really?
There were a lot of women. It was really
34%.
I know, that's like really specific.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
That's huge. I mean,
pretty good number.
Like when I started, there were like 2. You know, and then it's in my opinion, exploded.
Is that kind of how the comedy scene is everywhere though?
I think
less
so.
females and more males.
It's a tough place to be for a girl.
For
You know,
sure.
you have to be really thick-skinned. but it's worth it.
So why did you stop doing comedy? Just time?
Just time. Yeah.
Comedy is one of those things you have to go all in or just be like, okay, I'm going to focus on something else.
Yeah. And it's really difficult because like my comedy is clean comedy. I don't do like dirty or blue comedy. Mm-hmm. And everybody else does. And so it's really hard to navigate that and like try to want to keep doing it when you're not doing sex jokes or not doing like.
Did you just never want to do dirty jokes or sex jokes, or is it just not your style?
It's not my style. Like I think it's funny. Like if it depends. But like I'm not one to be like, oh, that's the lowest form of comedy. But like it's just not the type of comedy I want to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
And my whole thing is like, it doesn't matter if it's clean or dirty, as long as it's clever.
As long as it's done right.
Yeah. And a lot of people rely so much on shock factor that it's not funny. Mm-hmm. So I think I respect clean comedy more because it's actually more effort.
Oh, totally.
To be clever, and the joke writing is way harder.
Oh, yeah. Totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I would point at Chrissy because she needs to get back into comedy.
Yeah, girl.
The two of you need to go do an open mic. Go together.
There's a show at Wise Guys called Dumb Broads. And it's hosted by Rachel Rothenberg, I think is her name.
Okay.
And Crystal was on the last one. I think it's like a once a month thing, maybe every other month. I don't know. But it's like all girls. And
that is so cool.
Yeah. And it's like specifically Rachel hosts it. And I think the last one had Natasha, Crystal, and someone else.
So is this like a open mic type thing?
No, it's a show.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's done every month or every other month.
Yeah, it's kind of like they'll do kind of special monthly shows.
At Wise Guys, though.
Yeah. It's Dumb Broads at Wise Guys.
Okay. I think, you know what, now that you say this, I might have saw something. And so this is a different night of the week, but it's not open mic.
No.
But which Chrissy needs to get back and do open mic. I think so.
Well, the open mic at Wise Guys is hard because you only have 3 minutes, and it's extremely competitive because that's the one that everyone signs up for.
Yeah.
And they've changed it now so you can email in and you don't have to be there at like 4:00 in the afternoon.
That's so nice.
I know. So you can just email in and you have to be there like at 6. And that was the other thing too is when I really wanted to start getting back into comedy, I worked a job that I couldn't be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the time.
See, that's what happened to me. And I would actually I did a lot of most of my open mic was Trolley Square and West Valley. Mm-hmm. So I would just call Penny at the front desk and I'd be like, hey, can you put me on the list? Because I knew I wasn't going to make it in time.
Yeah.
Because the list would fill up so fast.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, no, you can email in, but you have to be there at 6. And like so I emailed in and I got on the list, but I can't leave work until 6:30. And they're like, sorry, too bad. So sad.
Oh, that sucks.
I know. And then now I have a job where I'm like super flexible and I can go wherever I want. But like, I haven't put the time into writing new jokes. And
it's so much work.
It is so much work.
You have to dedicate hours every day to writing and planning and practicing. And it really is kind of like another part-time job if you really want to do it.
Well, it seems like to be a successful comedian, you really have to put your whole self into that, and you almost can't do anything else.
Yeah.
And that's what I find. Like every time I take on a new hobby or a new interest, it's almost like everything gets neglected a little bit more. So, and that's why I was wondering if you ran into that with comedy and podcasting, and are you still doing any writing too, like for Slug or City Weekly or anything?
Not for Slug or City Weekly. I'm trying to make myself more of a developed like film critic.
Okay, so a little fancy there, like no, I mean actually, right, yeah. So Big Shiny Robot is where most of my like film review stuff is. I just did one for City Weekly, so I'm trying to like build that up. But as far as like writing goes, not so much. Would you like to see something happen with the writing? Like do something more full time with that?
No.
Or is that just kind of a passion hobby?
It's just kind of like a thing I like to do.
Okay.
If I'm thinking more, because I am always thinking in terms of like what's going to be the most productive, I guess. And I hate to say it, but people don't really read anymore. So like I dabbled for a little bit in like video and trying to figure out how to edit video so I could maybe do like film reviews, like video reviews. And then also I spend a lot of time trying to work on how I pitch things like verbally because I do a lot of podcasting, obviously. So I'd spend a lot of time talking about movies on the podcast. And I dedicate a lot of my bandwidth trying to figure out how to make that like the most productive.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
You don't think many people read much or more newspapers type things?
So like I have like ADHD, so I know
we all do. Welcome to the club, right?
Yeah. So like if I come across something and I see it's like 3 paragraphs worth of text, I'm like, oh God, I'm not gonna. And
like Chris sent me a really interesting website the other day, and I tried to open it today, and I'm like, man, I want to read all of this, but I don't have time. Like, I wish somebody would put this into a podcast form so I could just listen to it.
Yep. Oh,
so,
yeah.
You know, it's just hard. It's like time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine like the Salt Lake Tribune in a podcast, daily podcast?
I would love it.
That would be so great. You guys should do that.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of work.
That is a lot of work. Well, if someone else does the work, we just read what they write.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
No, interesting.
There you go.
Yeah, no, it is interesting to see like kind of how media has shifted. It surprises me even video, like how much video people watch versus audio, right? Like video podcasts on YouTube are a lot more popular than audio podcasts. So it seems. Maybe I'm wrong.
And I think that's really because people are familiar with YouTube, and a lot of people will put it on and not actually watch the video. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're probably right.
But it's also like, so at work, I'll ask, I try to limit like my phone calls as much as possible because I don't retain the information and disperse it evenly. So it's just, I'm like, hey, that's cool. Will you also send this to me in an email? Because if I have it written down in front of me, then I'm more likely to be like, okay, no miscommunication here. But like, I could listen to a bunch of different podcasts and be like, oh my God, did you know?
Do most of your conversations start with, I learned on a podcast? Because for me, for sure, I'm like, oh, I listened to a podcast where blah, 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 blah. And I think I drive everybody around me crazy, but that's okay.
I every now and then, because I listen to a lot of My Brother and Me.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
I reference that all the time, and nobody gets.
Doesn't that drive you crazy?
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, it's this podcast thing.
It's just a podcast.
It's just a podcast. But then, like, kind of tangentially, like, if I eavesdrop and hear someone talking about podcasts, I'm like, oh, you guys talking about podcasts? Like, what do you guys like to listen to? And they're like, oh, Ben Shapiro. And I'm like, oh. never mind. Ew.
So.
Not like fun podcasts. Yeah.
Hey, we just wanted to take a moment of your time and tell you about one of our affiliate partners, Libsyn. Hey, I know there's a lot of listeners that are listening right now and you are looking to start your very own podcast. And how do I know this? It's because you're sending me emails every day and you're saying, Chris, how do I start a podcast? What are some tips? What are some tricks? Well, if you're thinking of starting a podcast, or maybe you have a friend that wants to start a podcast, if you or someone you know, if you're in the process of starting a podcast and you're looking for the very best podcast audio host out there, go check out Libsyn.com. We've been using Libsyn to host this very podcast, I Am Salt Lake Podcast, for over 7 years now, and I truly could not be more happy with them. They make it super easy to set up. They make it super easy to get your podcast routed to all the podcast players out there like Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcasts. Hey, I Am Salt Lake Podcast listeners, pay attention because we created a very special code just for you. Use the promo code Salt Lake and you'll get the rest of this month and all of next month of free hosting at Libsyn.com. Again, that promo code is Salt Lake, and you'll be supporting this podcast, and you'll get yourself a month of free podcast hosting at Libsyn.com. That's spelled Libsyn.com. And again, use that promo code Salt Lake. And many thanks to Libsyn for their support of this podcast. Let's get back into that conversation that we had with Rebecca Frost. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy. Podcasting, it seems pretty hot right now, right? Like everybody wants to podcast. Yeah. I'm sure you're getting hit up a lot, right? Like, I want to start a podcast. Tell me how to do it. Yeah. What do you tell people? Like, do you have a few pieces of advice? Like, what do you tell people?
I tell them to Google it. And then after I tell them to Google it, I say, build up your inventory. Don't record one podcast and release it out into the world because you will lose steam.
Yeah.
Build up your, like, if it's not topical, actually, don't be topical at all because we have enough podcasts that are 4 white guys talking about Marvel movies. Like, we have enough of that. Like, you could be 4 white guys talking about the philosophy behind Marvel movies. That would be cool.
That would be fascinating.
Right?
I would love that. Yeah.
Like, take whatever concept you have right now, because I can tell you it's already been done, and twist it.
Yeah.
Like, find something that's different. I think the big thing is build up your inventory, build up at least like 4 to 6 episodes that you can release. And in that time, you can record other episodes and not feel burnt out or rushed.
You know, I didn't even know that people did that. I actually learned that from Geekshow, how they do they record 3 episodes and then, you know, every 3 weeks, I guess. I don't know. I'm assuming they're still on that same schedule.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that. Like, I thought, hey, if you recorded like this, if we recorded on a Friday night, you have to release it on a Saturday.
Oh, dude,
right? Like,
me too.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
And
when I
it's weird
started,
how
I
you
always
don't know those things.
recorded and released the next day.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's so cool about podcasting is you can set your own schedule.
Yeah.
And like, Hello Sweetie, we used to record every week. And it was
gets
cool.
a lot.
It was cool when we were in our 20s. And we are not anymore.
We're getting old, man.
We have jobs and lives. So
Right.
Hello Sweetie, now we record 2 every other week. So we have at least like a week off. And Geek Show does 3 every 3 weeks. And if you're available, we do Broken News every Sunday for like 45 minutes. And so if you're available, cool. If not, don't stress.
Yeah.
People don't think about how it is a podcast. You can set your own pace. And
Right.
with Rebootleggers, if we do it every other week, if we can't get together, it's not going to be the end of the world. It is a podcast.
Well, it also depends, like if you have like, you know, things to fulfill, sponsors, advertisers,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But typically, if you got to that point, then you've probably already
If
have
you've
a
got
good
to that,
system.
if you've
Yeah.
got to that point, then you figured it out. And awesome. Keep it
Yeah.
up.
True. You're probably on track.
Yeah.
So out of all these things that you've done, writing, comedy, I mean, even roller derby, which
Yeah.
we I think we might have mentioned
skimmed
that a
over.
little bit.
Briefly
Which,
mentioned
are you
it.
doing anything with roller derby?
God,
still?
no, my body would fall apart.
'Cause that would seem like that would beat up your body.
Yeah. I'm 30 and my knees already like hurt all the time.
Oh, it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
going to keep getting worse.
I
Wait till
know.
you get 40. Wait till you get. No, anyways.
Chris is like, let me tell you.
I'll tell you all about it.
I'm turning 42 here in a couple of weeks. I can't believe
couple
I'm
of weeks. What are you
best
doing? What are you
age.
doing for your birthday?
We're actually going to LA
Oh, fun.
and I'm going to smoke weed with Tommy Chong.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I actually just said that.
Is that
on
like
the
a
podcast.
package like you can
It is
buy?
the birthday.
No, it's okay.
Yeah,
you
kind
want
of.
to? Okay, I'm going to share this because the listeners are going to get a kick out of this anyway. I was scrolling through Instagram, right, and Tommy Chong shows up. It's like smoke weed with me, right? Like,
Okay.
come and see my
Dispensary.
dispensary. My mind's blank, and it said December 7th. And I'm looking at it and I'm kind of chuckling inside. I'm like, well, December 6th is my birthday. And so I took a screenshot and sent it to Chris. I'm like, we should do this for my birthday. Kind of half joking, but kind of half
Don't
serious
ever do
too,
that
right?
to me because you know what happens.
You know, because
And
it's
we're just gonna do it
down in Los
Oh, it's
Angeles.
amazing.
And she's like, do you want to do it? And I'm like, yeah, it could be fun. And then next thing I know, she bought tickets already because you get this tour. So you get this tour of the dispensary and you get to watch them blow glass and everything. And then you get to hang out and
And there's like a Food
see-
Network chef that's going to cook for us and stuff. Right?
This
sounds phenomenal.
This whole afternoon deal.
It sounds amazing.
And
What
so,
is the name of his dispensary?
it's like Chong
question.
something. It's his own strain. I'll get
Yeah.
it for you. I'll get
Yeah.
it. But
We'll
it's
find out.
it's in Studio City.
Cool.
And so we're like, you know what? Let's just go down to Los Angeles for my.
Well, it's like, dude, we're getting
yeah.
on in age, right?
Yeah.
And we don't really do big celebrations for our birthdays ever, so
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah.
Like, let's just
Yeah.
do it.
And
I
I've-
think so.
Yeah.
That's
and
so
Tommy
cool.
Chong. I mean, I grew up watching Cheech and Chong, that 70s show. And
Yeah.
then, gosh, has he done it? I don't think I've seen him on anything else besides those.
He's probably
But,
been busy growing pot.
Yeah. No, anyway. So yeah, that's
so
what I'm
cool.
Doing. That's what I'm doing. I don't know. You want to come
jealous.
along?
Well,
Oh, and then get this, right? So then I'm looking on Airbnb, and actually I posted a picture on Facebook today. We found this like pirate themed Airbnb.
Oh my God.
That we're going to stay at.
It's so cool.
And you know, because I'm looking through and it's hard to look and pick, and you're like, well, there's such different prices, and you never know the exact locations, blah blah blah. And then I just saw the pirate one. I said, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
It's meant to be. So.
My fiance and I, because I mentioned he's a LARPer, and we go to Ren fairs a lot, not like a lot, maybe once or twice a year.
Do you get turkey legs when you're there? 'Cause that's all I
Obviously.
want
What-
to do.
What kind
Okay.
of fair is this?
Renaissance.
A Renaissance fair.
Oh, see,
I want to go so bad.
Wait, what?
You've never been to a Renaissance fair?
But
they're the coolest thing.
My mom took me all the time.
because they are LARPers, and I'm also, I guess, a performer. We
Are
dress
you a
up.
LARPer?
No, God, no. I did it once and never again. But like we get dressed up as pirates and we go as pirates. And sometimes they think we're part of the show. And it's turkey legs is the best way when you're drunk and walking around.
Oh, hell yeah.
100 degrees in your pirate garb. It's like
Your corset.
yeah, like it's just the easiest thing to eat.
Yeah. Dude, oh, that's so cool. I'm so jealous. I would love to dress up and go to a Renaissance fair.
It's so much fun.
Where are they at? Are they around here in Salt Lake?
There are a few, right?
There's one in Salt Lake. It's kind of up north. It's not great. It's not great. But Denver has a really good one. There was one in Phoenix that we went to. I want to say it was just outside of Phoenix. My fiance and his friends, they always go to the one in Texas in like San Antonio.
So they're serious.
They're
hardcore,
They get
man.
really.
Oh, a couple of years ago,
And
they
here
went to
I'm
the
trying
one
to
in
justify my trip to California.
Well, there is one in California. I don't know where, but they went for a friend's bachelor party, and it was the same. I'm looking at Snapchat, and I follow Felicia Day on Snapchat. I don't anymore, but
it's okay if you do.
Well, I don't use Snapchat. I'm
Wait,
like,
Felicia
it's
Day
so-
is the chick in Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm on Snapchat looking at her story, and I'm like, oh, she's at the Ren Fair. Wait a second. This is the one they're at. And so I'm like frantically texting, like, Felicia Day is there. You gotta find her.
That's so awesome.
They did not find her, but
man.
But yeah, they're everywhere. There's at least like one in every state, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
They look like fun. I've never actually been.
They're fun.
I feel like I got distracted a little bit. Did we find out of all these things that you've done what your favorite is?
Oh, yeah, no.
Oh, my favorite.
I think we got a little distracted there. Oh,
we were talking about pirates and
birthdays,
pot
then
and Renaissance fairs.
I
mentioned my
turned it
birthday.
on you and
No,
asked
no,
you
no,
a
no.
question.
Hey, I love it though. A podcaster starts interviewing another podcaster. But
It's podcast all the way down.
is it podcasting that you like the most? Probably.
Of all, so
You can be honest.
I love podcasting, but by now it's kind of like someone who bikes a lot. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, it's like I bike. Like that is my
It's just what you are.
My most favorite thing I've ever done was when we were living in New York. I got to do sketch comedy in New York, and that was like my one bucket list item was to do sketch comedy.
You. That is the absolute best, most fun thing you could ever do.
And like it wasn't Saturday Night Live, but like it was still the thing I wanted.
Yeah.
And
have you ever thought about going to Chicago and trying to get into like
right?
What is it called?
So there's Second City.
Second City? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's Second City in New York. I did a couple of classes at the Pit, the People's Improv Theater, because it's the Pit, UCB is the other big one. And there's a couple of others, but the Pit had more of the classes that I wanted to take.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chicago is one of those places where I'm like, oh, that would be so cool to do. But it's
it would be so
Chicago,
cool.
and I don't know that I want to live in
know.
Chicago.
Actually, I love Chicago. It just gets
It's so
really
cold.
It's
That's
so
the thing.
cold.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd live in Chicago. I mean, it's a beautiful city.
It's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
Very cold.
Yeah. Same thing about New York. Like I loved New York. I love it so much.
Where did you live in New York? Right in the city.
We lived in Brooklyn,
Okay.
but my fiance worked in Manhattan. So, and a lot of the stuff we did was in Manhattan. So, but we would commute from Brooklyn to Manhattan. And I loved it so I will never live there again.
Why
Really?
not? What happened?
Yeah, what happened?
What
brought you
happened?
back?
Oh,
Give us the tea.
You just missed Utah. You missed Salt Lake. I mean, that's fair,
that's-
right?
Yeah, totally. Well, actually, yes. Living there, it's crazy. He got a job with Blue Apron. So he was working with Blue Apron for the year, and then his old job offered him a better position.
The old job back here in Salt Lake.
The old job back here in Salt Lake. So we were like, and he has his family here and that he like takes care of. And we have like rental properties too. So it was just easier to come back.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Plus Salt Lake City, I mean, it would seem like New York City, you just kind of drown there. It just seems like it's really easy to just like be in the shadows and
But like
It's so busy and so full.
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
so I'm pretty, kind of like a lone wolf. I do a lot of stuff like by myself.
Yeah.
And New York is the perfect place to do that because nobody gives a shit. Like nobody cares. And like nobody's
true. You just
nobody's
kinda-
paying attention to you.
Yeah.
So,
That's true.
Yeah.
And that's kind of nice.
It was really nice. Yeah.
Is that hard here in Salt Lake to do? I mean,
Oh my God,
I
yes.
just do it.
I think
don't know.
it is because, I mean, a lot of the times I know I'll say something on a podcast or I'll post something online or, whatever. And then, you forget about it. You're like, oh, that's just something I said one time. But then you run into people in real life and they remember things and they're like bringing all this stuff up and they're like, oh, you said this that one time. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's not all of who I am. But I guess that's what we're going with right now.
Well, and like in New York too, like nobody talks to you. You're walking down the street, nobody talks to you. The week we moved back, we'd be walking somewhere and someone would like ask me a thing and I'm like, why?
Don't
Don't talk to me.
No, it is true how you get that mentality.
Yeah.
Your defense is more, people here are a little friendlier, I think. Do you like it that you're back though?
Oh,
I guess
love
that's
it.
kind of a silly question.
Yeah, I love it. And it does fit more with my life. I am more likely to be like, just walk up to a stranger and ask them a question. And I feel better about it than I would say walking around in Manhattan.
You get maced in Manhattan, probably.
And you said your husband worked for Blue Apron.
For Blue Apron.
They didn't sponsor Hello Sweetie, Blue Apron?
Yeah, it was a whole
I'm
thing.
kidding.
They spent, do you know how much money they spend on podcast advertising? Or
I'm
they used to
curious.
at least.
They're still out there. What are they?
HelloFresh took over now.
Yeah,
did they?
HelloFresh took over. I don't remember the exact numbers, but like,
it was a lot. Huh?
he would tell me and I'm like, oh, you spend how much?
Oh yeah, podcast
Just
advertising.
throw 5,000 this way. Per
Yeah.
month. That'd be great.
Yeah, it was crazy. But I if Blue Apron sponsors this, I am actually like a full-on fan of Blue Apron. I love their products.
Yeah,
I've always wanted to try them.
but, I've never tried them. They're not. They're
I
not
love
our
them.
sponsors or anything.
I like
screw
Blue Apron.
them.
I like Blue Apron the most because their boxes are like super small.
Have you tried I'm totally going off the rails
No,
here,
that's
but
fine, that's
have you tried different meal kit delivery systems?
We've tried Blue Apron, HelloFresh. There's like a handful of others. I don't really remember the names.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
Personally, yes. I cannot cook and I hate to cook and I hate food waste. And so this like eliminates everything I hate. It's like step by step because I need someone to tell me what to do because I get cooking is supposed to be like an art, not a science. I can't do that. My brain doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And so like Blue Apron, like, here's what you do. Okay, cool. Now do this. Okay. And then it looks good and it tastes good.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's what makes me curious about it. Cause I'm like, dude, you just have the stuff and you make the stuff and you eat the stuff.
Yeah. And like, I hate meal planning and like grocery shopping.
See, I love going to the grocery store.
I cannot stand it. So this, like the meal kits, like they just take care of it for you.
Going to
Okay,
Winco.
so you might be like me because he's really good at grocery shopping, but every time I go with him, I get distracted and I'm like, oh, look at this thing and look at, and he's like, it's not on the list, Chrissy. And I'm like, but look at this. But look at this. I want to try all these crazy things that I didn't know existed. And then
I'm
spend
the
$1 million.
worst. I can't go grocery shopping by myself because I'm like, fun box. And like buy the box.
Free toy inside.
Like, oh my God, how cool. That's how I got an Entertainment Weekly subscription was because in their ads, they were like free Spider-Man duffel bag. And I'm like, okay, Entertainment Weekly subscription.
I like you.
Let's switch over gears a little bit too. We have some Salt Lake City questions that we ask everybody that comes on here, Rebecca.
Yes, I'm ready.
We all have, family and friends, right? Come to town, they visit, and we kind of like to show them around the tour, buildings, hikes, campouts. I don't know couple recommendations, Utah. I say Salt Lake City, but I really mean Utah, really,
Utah? So I personally really like Zion's.
Yeah.
Emerald Pools is like my favorite hike, my most favorite hike in the world. It's where I got engaged. But like beyond that, I think it's a really pretty hike. But in Salt Lake specific, it depends on the person, right? Like my grandma came to town a couple months ago and she and my mom are really into otters. So I was like, okay, what can I
Otter?
craft
Like the
up?
animal?
Like the animal?
Like the animal.
Aww.
And so I was like, what can I craft up? Sequest and Layton has otters that you can like play with. So I was like, okay, tickets to Sequest and Layton.
Wait, what is Sequest?
It's like an aquarium in a mall.
I've seen billboards.
Like,
Is
it's
it like
not
the
great.
aquarium down in Draper, or is
no,
it worse?
It is in a mall. It is like
It's like
if you took a Forever
like an
21
island in a mall.
and then just put like fish
No kidding.
in it. Yeah, it's not great. I don't really condone it. But like they have otters.
But they have otters.
And I was like, that could be a fun experience.
Sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went and did that. I always like to like stay local. And so I had a friend from Denver for Comic-Con coming to town. And I was like, okay, brunch, we're going to Fillings and Emulsions. Dinner. Where did we go for dinner? I don't remember where we went for dinner, but like I always try to keep it like local.
Sure.
It's like Fillings and Emulsions is my most favorite place recently to take people for breakfast. They don't have like a breakfast menu. They're just more like pastries and stuff, but they have this meat pastry thing. Oh, it's because they're a Cuban bakery. So, it's so good.
You had me at meat.
Yeah, right? I know.
Yeah,
I'll eat the bread, you eat the meat. We're fine.
they're a Cuban bakery and they won some award. You guys should look them up.
Yeah. No, we'll look them up. Yeah.
Sweet Lake biscuits.
Oh, they're good.
Like
So
I like
good.
to go there. Oh, it's depending on the time of year. I'll say like the garage so that we can eat outside because their outdoor setup is phenomenal.
Yeah, they have a great patio.
Yeah. A lot of my recommendations are like food related.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask that too, favorite local eating spots, but I was just letting you kind of go. You were kind of going with them. I like it.
Well, because I was trying to prepare.
Yeah.
And so I asked my fiance and I'm like, what? You have a friend coming into town. He's like, I do. And I'm like, no, hypothetically. And
well, no, and I know it's tough because everybody is different. It also depends. Like maybe there's a good, live concert that night,
totally.
or maybe for wintertime, take them out snowboarding, or and I don't snowboard.
I don't either. But I was like, what? Let's say you have someone coming to town who's outdoorsy. What do you recommend? And he said the living room.
Yeah, that's a good hike.
It's a good hike. It's a bit exhausting for me because I'm a little out of shape. So I was like Tanner Park because there's dogs there and it's not a hike. It's like a fun nature walk. And so that's where we like diverge. But yeah.
Would you change anything about Salt Lake City if you could? Like if you say you had the opportunity to change one or two things, is there anything that just like, I got to get rid of this, not have this?
It's really tough to say. Because I feel like Salt Lake is always evolving for the better, especially recently. It's like in this upswing of evolving.
Yeah.
Like it is a good place to like start out and grow a thing. If I'm going to get political, like affordable housing is a big one.
People always say liquor laws, air quality. I mean, those are kind of common things,
I like that you said
right?
affordable housing because that's huge.
Yeah, I don't think that really gets
yeah.
talked about a whole lot.
Yeah. And
much.
like, Airbnb is like ruining rentals and that's a whole separate conversation.
It's tough because Airbnb is such a great idea.
It's such a great
Yeah.
idea, but it's getting to a point now where people are Airbnb-ing rather than renting because it's easier and it's a more consistent income and
It's jacking up prices.
And so now all these like condos and townhomes are going up for rent starting at $1,200 a month and nobody makes that.
Yeah.
So that's like a big sticking point for me.
Yeah.
And especially with like the road home closing and the whole shelter fiasco. But I think, it's in a point where it's changing. And especially too, because Salt Lake wants to match what like Utah County is as far as like tech startups and everything. Salt Lake, I read a thing, I can't remember where it was, but we feel like we missed the mark on that. And so maybe we need to put a bit more emphasis on that. And so you can kind of see that like starting to happen. But like as far as changing anything, I think Salt Lake kind of realizes like some stuff needs to be changed and it's working on it.
Yeah.
No, and I agree. I mean, if you change too much, then it's not Salt Lake or Utah, right? Like that's kind of its charm in my way. Like as much as I even like liquor laws to change, part of the charm is like your little tricks to find out, if I do this, then I can get more shots in front of me, right?
It's true. Trying to beat the system is a lot of fun.
It's kind of fun. I don't know.
It's so fun. It's like, okay, when we go out, I'm like, Chris, you order a drink and I'll order a drink and then I'll drink your drink.
It works.
That way I get two.
It works.
So when we lived in New York, because we didn't drive, we spent the first 2 months there maybe like drunk 90% of the time. And after that first 2 months, we were like, oh, we gotta stop.
It's just too accessible.
It's just too accessible. It is and it isn't because like you can buy stuff. You could buy like liquor and stuff at the grocery. Well, I'm trying to remember.
Probably little like markets on the corners there out in New York. So you just everywhere you walk.
You would be surprised. Like we had to go to an actual liquor store
really?
by our apartment. Yeah.
See, I'm so used to Wisconsin where like you can walk into a grocery store and half of the grocery store is a liquor store, just open.
But like it was so expensive.
Yeah.
And then we would come back to Utah to visit and we go to Piper Down where they have like $1 mimosas. Yeah. And we're like, cool, we drove here, so we cannot.
Oh yeah, that's
we're
true.
Like, the scales.
Yeah.
Leave the car, take an Uber. You're fine.
You mentioned you don't snowboard. Are you a winter person? Is there anything you're excited with winter coming up?
No, I don't like the winter at all. I don't like being cold. I lived in Phoenix for a summer and I loved it.
Yeah.
Like that's how much I love the heat.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, good for you.
I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm not really a winter person. I wish every year I'm always like, man, I should take up some new winter hobby so I can like it, but it just doesn't.
I like to look at it.
Yeah. No, it's
I
pretty
like
from
to
the
be
window.
inside with a
From the
blanket
window.
and some hot cocoa and Netflix and look out the window.
And I'm always
That's
like,
perfect.
this is the year I'm gonna do more hiking in the winter because I really like hiking. I'm terrified to do it in the summer because I'm like terrified of snakes. And I mean,
That's valid.
I know it's not like as big a deal as I make it out to be in my brain, but I'm just like,
Not mountain
Not even
lions,
gonna-
but snakes.
yeah,
No,
not
man,
even gonna-
I've hiked the Y a few times and there are always huge snakes that come across
Yeah.
your path. It's not even,
Yeah.
it's not a joke.
And if I want to take my dog, I'm always like, well, if something happens to him, I got to carry him back down the mountain. He's like 70 pounds. I don't want to do that.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm like, well, we can go in the winter because he's an Australian Shepherd and he loves just being outside in the cold. And I like to hike, so maybe this will be good. And then I kind of started it. I'm like, oh my God, it's so and I would just like get sweaty. And because it's cold, you get clammy. Like it's just a combination.
Like you sweat and then it freezes on you and then you're extra cold.
Like these are things I hate. I hate all of these things. So more of a summer person.
I can dig
Yeah.
it. Man. I can,
Agreed.
I could get into that. Anyway, let's wrap this podcast up. It's been so much fun to
Yeah,
bring you
I'm
on.
so happy
It really has
I'm
been.
glad. I mean, it's like it said, you wrote that article in Slug on me like 7 years ago.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
were
it's-
wee babies.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I have like a shaved head. And actually, it's still on like the slugmag.com site, isn't it? I'm sure it's
Probably,
still.
yeah. They have, like, their archived
I'll
issues.
find a link for that and post it with
Put it in the
this
show notes?
with this episode. So if anybody
Yeah.
wants to check it out, because I think I even have like a buzzed head and I don't even have a beard in it or anything.
I think you do have like a buzzed head. Yeah.
Yeah. Really short haircut. Really short haircut. If people want to get a kick out of that. But
I remember your setup too. You had your MacBook and like a tiny microphone.
yeah. No, it's the podcast has come along.
Yeah. Like seriously, congratulations. You've built this into such a
I've done so many different things and had to move it around, and I mean, I've just kept trucking week after week. With
but
it.
it's built so like it's this huge thing now. Like congratulations. That's so much work.
Thank you.
We
Thank
fake it real good.
No, but was there anything that you were hoping we would talk about before we completely wrap this up? I mean, was there like anything that you were like, gosh, I really want to talk about that? But I think I kind of asked that even in the beginning, if there was anything
Not
you wanted
really.
to promote. Mention, like, again, the podcast that you're part of that people can listen to hear more of Rebecca Frost.
I have everything on my website, RebeccaSFrost.com or ChrisEvansPleaseBoneMe.com. It redirects to my website.
Who's Chris Evans? I don't.
Captain America.
Okay, see, I don't know. I'm not the.
Oh my gosh. Like, if you die, I'm marrying her. I love you. Oh, that's the best thing I've ever heard.
So RebeccaSFrost.com. Hello Sweetie Podcast.
And that comes out every week, every 2
Every
weeks.
week.
Okay.
Yeah, that comes out every week. Geek Show every week. Rebootleggers every other week if we feel like it. Big Shiny Robot every week if we feel like it. Most of my writing stuff's on BigShinyRobot.com. But I'm just kind of everywhere.
And I'll put all those links at iamsaltlake.com with this episode as well. So if people are driving or can't remember, again, awesome to have you on the show. I think we have had every Geek Show now except Tony. We still need to get Tony.
Tony's hard to track
We
down.
still need to get Tony on the podcast.
I bet we
here.
could
And
get
then
him.
Then we'll have. It took us a while to get Shannon. It took us a while to get
yeah.
Shannon on here, but
Yeah.
It was worth it.
Yeah. So
Yeah, he's a blast.
you have a final question, Chrissy?
I do.
Throw that out there.
I do have a final question. If you have a piece of life advice or a motto that you would leave with our listeners, what would it be?
When you said like literally 30 seconds ago, like, oh, we fake it like the best we can. The thing that gets me through a lot of like, whenever I start to feel like insecure or intimidated is remembering literally nobody knows what they're doing. And that just gets me through a lot of like really difficult times. Literally nobody knows what they're doing. And once you accept that and just realize that, life gets like so much easier.
All right. Many thanks again to Rebecca Frost for joining us on this episode. All of the links that we mentioned in the conversation can be found with this episode's show notes on our website. You can find that by going to iamsaltlake.com/408. Really easy, you guys. That's for episode 408. So go check it out and connect with Rebecca.
Support for I Am Salt Lake comes from KRCL 90.9, amplifying community voices since 1979. This listener-supported music discovery station covers everything from reggae and punk rock to local grassroots activism. Listen today at 90.9 FM or online at krcl.org.
And what is that intro music you did for our weekly recommendation, Chrissy?
I think it's like woo woo. Is it like alarm sirens?
Where did you even get those sounds from?
You know those guns you used to shoot, like.
What?
Do you remember that?
What guns were you shooting?
If you guys were not, Chris maybe didn't know this gun, but I know all of you listening, you knew those guns. They were the coolest toy.
I wasn't allowed to play with guns, Chrissy.
I played with guns.
Hey, it's weekly recommendation time. It is that time of the podcast that Chrissy and myself, we give a little recommendation, something that either we enjoyed doing this last week or just something we want to tell you guys about. I'm going to go first because this one I was really excited for. So I've been wanting to try visiting Hello Bulk. It's this new place in downtown Salt Lake City that you can go and get all of your items in bulk, which is really good. I love this concept. They're located at 355 North, 500 West. Go check them out. I mean, they got tons of spices and shampoos and some kombuchas and I mean, I don't know. We even got really gummy bears there.
Yeah, they've got a little bit of this, a little bit of that, personal care products, food, everything.
We're bringing the owner on this podcast, so we figured we needed to go check it out.
Yeah, man, got to get familiar. It's a cool place.
So Hello Bulk, go check them out. What's your weekly recommendation, Chrissy?
Okay, I have a selfish weekly recommendation this week. It is the Legendarium podcast where I was guesting on this past week. If you like all things nerd and you want to listen to me talk about why I think Utah is the nerdiest state in the country, which it is, by the way, it's been proven, but my theories behind it is what we discuss. So you can go to thelegendariumpodcast.com and just look for the latest episode. It's called The Nerdiest State in the U.S.
And you weren't kidding. I mean, this is like the nerdiest podcast. A lot of it goes over my head.
Oh, I know.
A lot of it goes up. But if you're Craig Hanks, I mean, this is his podcast. I mean, I know he's got.
Craig's brilliant.
We had him on this show back in like the 200s.
Yeah.
Great podcaster. Go check it out. The Legendarium podcast. They're, from the area, from Salt Lake City area. So go check them out.
It's a very cool show. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to show your support for this podcast by supporting our show sponsors, KRCL, Green Bike, and Libsyn. We'll have links for all of them at our website under the notes for this episode, which you can find at iamsaltlake.com.
And if you're looking for other ways to support the podcast, first of all, like Chrissy says, support our sponsors. I mean, these guys, they believe in this podcast. So when you support them, you're supporting the show. But there are some other great ways that support can be given to the podcast. You can become a Patreon supporter, and I cannot urge you enough. I mean, if you even become a Patreon supporter for $1, that $1 goes a long way. Basically, it's like an ongoing Kickstarter where you kick on over $1, $5 a month, and that helps keep the lights on. It helps support us with microphones and website hosting. You can find that at iamsaltlake.com/Patreon. Or you can make a one-time donation, which is really cool as well, by going to iamsaltlake.com/PayPal, and that will forward you over to the PayPal landing page, which you can make a one-time donation for any amount. Or you can also support us non-monetarily by leaving us a review in Apple Podcasts or on our Facebook page. And the most important one here, if all you can do is this one, tell your family and friends about the podcast. Let's get this thing ginormous in 2020. Let's get I Am Salt Lake Podcast so big that like you're talking about this at your community get-togethers.
Water cooler conversations.
Water cooler conversations. So make sure to share the podcast with your family and friends. All right, you have a great week. Make sure to get out and enjoy the city. Support local whenever possible. And we're going to see you on the next episode.
And good night, Grammy.